So in the last lectures, we had a very close look at the different ways how we can collaborate via GitHub. This means on this slide here, I hope you remember it, we had a look at this slide earlier in this module. Well, here the collaboration part is kind of understood, I would say. There is one other point missing though, besides the portfolio page, which we'll tackle towards the end of this module, and that is the contribution part. Now, we could start the discussion whether contributing to a project is kind of the same as collaborating. I would say, for the purpose of this course and also generally in the GitHub world, contributing to a project means that I add value to a project, I improve the code of a project, for example, where I'm not specifically assigned to do so. This means if we have the example of an open source project again, which offers other people, other GitHub accounts, other GitHub users to improve that code, then these people are anonymous at first, so you don't directly assign these people, but anybody who wants to contribute to this project has the option to do so. So this is what we call contribution here, and this contribution process is a bit different from the collaboration process we had a look at in the last lectures. If you think about the case I mentioned, you have a public repository which is open to anybody, then you could of course say, hey, I want to check out this code, I might want to improve that code and therefore improve the project. And then you could say, okay, let me clone this project first, so let me bring this remote repo to my local environment. From a theoretical point of view, this could look something like this. You have account A and account B. Account A could be the account that holds the actual remote repository in his public repo. Account B could be yourself. Then you say, okay, I have this remote repository and I would like to establish a direct connection to this repository, meaning I don't need this repo in my own account. I just establish this connection via, a local copy with git clone. I can then work on this code, add a new commit, for example, and once I'm done, I could push my local changes to the remote repository and then I'm done. Well, this process works perfectly, but you need to be a collaborator, for example, of the account that holds that remote repository. As I said, for the open source case I mentioned here, where basically anybody could have the ability to contribute to this project, this would not be the case. Because how would account A know that you are existing and that you might want to contribute to this project and that you have the skills to actually, contribute to this project? This means the cloning process is nice, but only for, the closed environment, so to say, where account A and account B are related to each other and where account B is part of this account A person which holds the remote repository. So this is cloning, nothing new. I just wanted to emphasize it once again to understand the difference between a clone and a so-called fork and pull requests. What are these now? Well, as I said, think again about the open source case. You have a project on GitHub in a public repository and you want other people to be able to contribute to this project. Then you could be account A, for example, now, who holds that remote repository, and we have account B, which could be anybody, any other GitHub user. Account A holds the remote repository, but now account B doesn't create kind of a direct connection via git clone and then will clone it to his local environment. Here, account B creates a so-called remote copy, a so-called fork on GitHub, and therefore copies the remote repository, to his own account. So we have two remote repositories now. The initial one as part of account A and a full copy of that remote repository in the account B, so in the account of user B that I, illustrated here. And that's a very big difference. The clone process we had before to establish the connection to the remote repository in account A is a git command in the end. This copying process here, so copying a remote repository from one GitHub account to another one, this is a GitHub feature and not related to Git at all. It's important to keep in mind that from this point on, any changes you apply to this remote repository, which is now in your account, so this orange repo here, are not related or affecting the other repository here. So you basically created a complete copy of that remote repository. This has a great advantage now, because with the existence of this remote repository in your account, you can now again, establish a connection to this repository via git clone, nothing new, you create a local copy. There you then improve the code, you implement a new feature, you fix a bug, anything like this. Then you push these changes in a new commit to the remote repository, but again to the copy of the remote repository in your account, so to the forked repository, so to say. And then, we have the situation that account A holds the stage of the remote repository before your changes were implemented, and the repository in account B holds the updated, the latest commit, which has this update, this improvement incorporated. The problem is that, as I said, these two repositories are not related in any way, and you as person B, as account B, don't have any rights to merge these changes into the repository account A holds. This is where the second concept illustrated here comes into play. We have the fork, so the copy of the repo, and we have the so-called pull request. What is this pull request now? Well, you have your latest commit in your remote repository, and now you can create a so-called pull request. So you create this request, and this means you ask account A, so to say, or you inform account A, hey, I improved your code, I fixed the bug, I implemented a new feature. Could you please have a look? And if you're okay with it, would you like to merge this into your remote repository? So would you like to add this latest commit to your repository? As I said, this is nothing you as account B can do by default. You have to create this pull request, and as the name indicates, this is a request, so account A has to review what you did, or can review what you did, and if he or she agrees, then the merge can occur. That's exactly the process that is following here. After creating the pull request by account B, account A, the holder of the remote repository, sees that, okay, this pull request refers to my remote repository, so to a specific remote repository, of course, the one that was forked. Then account A can review the changes implemented, and typically account B also describes these changes made. And then account A can accept this pull request if he or she is okay with the changes made. And then, basically the changes are merged into the initial remote repository, and this latest commit is added, and therefore the code is hopefully improved. So this is the process of forks and pull requests compared to the actual clone process we had a look before in the course. Keep in mind that the main difference is that for cloning, if you want to add these commits, these changes to the initial project, you need to be part of that team as collaborator or as a member of a specific organization. Here, for the forks and pull requests, you basically only need, a public repository which, makes the code available. We'll of course dive into this fork and pull request logic as a next step. I just want to emphasize one thing here. This fork and pull request logic can not only happen for people which are not related to the actual, project, to the actual initial remote repository. It's a typical use case though, but it's also possible to fork repositories inside teams, for example. Because the great advantage of this logic, when comparing it to cloning it or the typical push approach we use throughout the course, is that here, reviews can be made by default. So if you create such a pull request, the owner of the repository always has the ability to directly review and comment your changes. Commenting can of course also be done inside the code, but comments can also be applied as part of a pull request, which can make life a bit easier when, another person, which can also be part of your team, has implemented some changes. Nevertheless, here in the course we'll follow the general, logic behind forks and pull requests. Therefore, I just wanted to emphasize that this is not restricted to people being outside your personal user account or outside your team or organization only. So that was a lot of theory, and as always, the practical part is more exciting and also easier. Therefore, let's work on a fork and pull request in practice.